We're going to be discussing the role of the globalized media in a global world to a global pandemic.
The authorities in this case always publicized the most extreme outlying statistic of risk. They played to every single public fear. I thought they did so astonishingly, and I think this to a certain extent has to do with the individuals involved. They seem to me to love to see the headline, "Millions may die."
Generally, I think there's been a relative lack of panic. I'm not, it's not been my observation. I travel quite a bit and have traveled over this period of time around the world. I've sat on the plane in Japan when they wouldn't let us off and came on with the, all the garb on, and checked everybody with the temperature sensors to see whether or not you had anybody had a fever, and if they did, they took everybody off into another room and decided whether to quarantine them or not. That's at one level, and I have to say I was absolutely surprised when it happened, but it's an example of where governments, I think, for a while, for whatever reason, chose to do that.
As the Royal Prince Alfred's intensive care director, Dr. Robert Herkey, said to me in an email exchange about this, the swine flu is a particularly tricky one when it comes to editorial decisions, and I quote him direct. He says, "Here is a disease with all sorts of experts in epidemiology, infectious diseases and public health," this is in Australia, "putting out soothing messages about the flu being no worse than any other year and essentially causing grave illness or killing only those with chronic underlying disease," bracket subscript, they were going to die anyway. Still quoting, "And yet there's another group of experts in other fields, such as his people in ICU, who are contradicting that message by saying that the disease is life-threatening to some normal young people."
On the front of yesterday's Evening Standard, "Swine flu soars." And this was a report of what Sir Liam said in his press briefing. I mean, so where's this small increase that he was referring to? Clearly, this was not an example of a professional playing a game and trying to pump things up. What it seems to be is that some quite good science writer has produced a story, and then the headline writer has chosen this word "soars" instead of the small increase, which was the original source.
If we've learnt anything, it's that you can't trust always government or public health bodies to get it right. So obviously our job is not just to accept and to transmit, but to question and to try and understand and maybe ask questions that people haven't asked.
Simon said at the beginning that the authorities publicise the most extreme aspects of outbreaks like swine flu. Isn't that right, Simon? But you said, Peter, that it's the media that picks on the most extreme scenarios and chooses to give sensationalist headlines like the one in the Evening Standard. So you can't both be right, can you?
I don't see how we could be doing it better. I can't think of many colleagues that I would think are trying to put out any sort of sensationalist message, and I certainly don't think we're playing a game amongst us professionals in order to try to increase our science funding or whatever. I do not recognise that scenario. We're quite busy enough. We've got other things to get on with. We don't really want to pump this up, and we know that if we do, we're going to fall flat on our faces.
Simon?
Well, you've fallen flat on your face. You got it wrong. I mean, Liam Donaldson has hyped every single flu scare for the past 5 years.
Can I respond?
Of course you may.
I do not recognise this description of Liam Donaldson. I mean, I think he's a quietly spoken, modest man in a difficult situation. I think, small increase, levels remain low, turning into, cases soar. Sir Liam is not trying to pump this up.
Billions of dollars, you said, going into trying to find a vaccine for swine flu. We were all told October it's going to be ready. Is it going to be ready by October?
I believe the first vaccines will be available end of September into October, and then it will roll out over the course of the next 5 or 6 months. It really depends on the productivity of the virus as it grows in the eggs and how quickly we can gear up to make that. I mean, the world's capacity to make vaccines is probably limited at some 800 million doses. That's all we're, so we can't make more than that. I don't know if we can make 800 million doses. It depends on the productivity of the seed of the virus. So we're still not sure how much vaccine we're going to have.
AstraZeneca making it, you've got it?
We are trying to make a vaccine at our MedImmune subsidiary. Yeah, it's not finished yet. I mean, this is my head of research and development reminds me that this is a scientific experiment, not a timeline. And it may or may not work the way we want it to work. So you all need to understand that.
Well, I think there are three outbreaks here. One is an outbreak of swine flu, and that certainly has happened, and actually has played out more or less as it was predicted in some of the reasonable scenarios. I think the second outbreak is information, unprecedented levels of information about what's going on here, not only scientifically, but also information to the public. And I think we've never had as efficient a machine for finding out about the virus and for telling people about it. And that's quite an extraordinary novelty. And I think the third, I quite agree with my clinical colleague from UCL, that there's been a remarkable outbreak of public common sense. I think people read all the different stories, including the excellent journalism by Simon Jenkins and others, and they balance the different stories that they're receiving, and they're actually really sensible about it. And I think telling people the truth as you see it often defuses their worst anxieties.